This is Sportish.
Do it better.
This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish.
This is Sportish. It's the show that we started to talk about sports and global sports shutdown. Thanks for hanging with us on For the Fans. I'm Jeff Brault. He's Dr. Keith Strother, director of the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. Big shout out to our producer, Mike Wallace. Let's jump right in to our program. Keith, if anyone watched last week's episode, and by the way, if you didn't,
did you ask that as a hypothetical? If anyone watched last week's episode, if by chance there's anyone who watched last week.
I'm curious who you are, and I'd like you to tell us why. If you haven't seen it yet, you can get it on ftfnext.com. Video archives are available, or like Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever. You can listen to the audio version of the show. If you caught last week's, and if you didn't, shame on you, but if you caught last week, you know that Keith and I spent 10 minutes arguing about a very important problem. I would like to tell you now that we have a solution. No, I did not buy a new webcam. I didn't do it. But that doesn't mean, Keith, that I'm not solutions oriented. So just to recap, there's a problem that happens with my camera and our lighting setup when I hold up this beautiful Sportish mug.
Don't do it. Don't do that. It makes me so angry. You know, because we spent some time. You know I'm not in a great mood. You know, and I'm going to talk about the Papa shot in a second. I'm bleeding from multiple parts of my body at this point, and I might have a hole in my ceiling.
Yeah.
And there's no Papa shot.
When I hold up the Sportish mug, and Keith, just for you, I'm not going to do it. It messes with the focus on my camera, with the lighting, and it creates this very mild darkening effect for like 15 seconds. I appealed to all of our friends out there in TV land last week. Just give me a break. Just let it go. You don't care that much. And they don't. They tweeted me. They texted me. They sent me emails. They said, Jeff, we're on your side. We agree. But I said, look,
that's not true. That's not true. They didn't do that.
Prove me wrong. But look, I am still, despite the fact that everyone's on my side, they know that I'm right. I'm still trying to make you happy. And so I came up with a solution. And here it is. It's a Mr. Peanut mug.
It totally works. It doesn't make... For those of you listening on the podcast, Jeff just held up a mug fully in the shape of a Mr. Peanut. Now, to be fair, I don't see the Mr. Peanut bobblehead on the set. Did you take the bobblehead and turn it into a mug?
I did not. I just moved him back down to the lower shelf where he belongs. He's still back there. But I did decide to bring another peanut into my life. And now to stop our white balancing issue, I've got a black and yellow mug that I'll use.
It's so much better. See, we've solved our problem. Although I still would like you to get the new webcam. Yeah, I'd still like you to get
We'll see. We'll see what happens. How is Planters not sponsoring this program? Like, what more do we have to do to make it known that we are Mr. Peanut supporters?
I don't know. My guess is no one from the higher up in corporate. I feel like we appeal more to the workers as opposed to the establishment, to the CEO types. So maybe we'll have to reach out. You know what? Why don't we start? So fans, please start tweeting at Planters on behalf of Sportish. This is like how Weezer ended up remaking the song Africa. Fans just kept tweeting, right? So just bang on Planters saying, why aren't you sponsoring Sportish? Maybe you can even refer them to the clip, right? And by the way, I'll tell you what, and I love nuts. I love all kinds of nuts. I love cashew nuts. I love Brazil nuts. I love all kinds of nuts. Macadamia nuts. I love the entire Planters library, right? I love it all. I love peanuts. I love chocolate covered peanuts. I love all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, a little too much, it kind of, can mess with your stomach a little, but I don't care. All right. We will sit here and eat nuts the whole show. We'll just eat nuts the whole show. We'll just eat bags of Planter nuts. I love the honey roasted nuts.
Roasted. That's my favorite peanut. Yeah. Love the honey roasted peanut.
What's your favorite nut?
Honestly, probably a peanut. It probably is. My favorite
really?
variety of nut.
First of all, peanut's not a nut; it's a legume. But continue.
Aren't they all legumes?
No, I think the others are nuts.
I thought all nuts were legumes.
No, I don't think that's true. I think the peanut isn't a. But peanut isn't. It's like a bean. It's like a bean. A peanut is in a different category than like your Brazil nut.
I guess I don't. I guess I've never thought enough about.
Well, that's 'cause-
I thought all nuts were legumes.
No, I don't believe that to be true. I think the nuts, like a walnut, is very different, or a pecan is very different.
I like a pecan.
And a fudge pecan pie.
Not a pecan. I like a pecan.
A pecan, right? And so
my favorite nut. I don't know what kind it is, but you know when you're in New York City and you stop by the roasted nut cart.
That's a chestnut. That's a chestnut.
That's a chestnut. I like
the roasted chestnuts. You like?
I like a good chestnut.
I mean the hot chestnuts? Are you talking about the hot
kind
chestnuts?
of candy? Well, I mean, I don't
know. No. Those are peanuts.
Like
You're talking about candy
nut.
nuts.
Yeah, a candy.
You're not talking
nut.
about a chestnut. Those can
great.
be anything. But a candy nut can be anything.
Sure. Whatever they're giving me at the street in the city, that's what I like.
I like the Brazil nut, the big long nut, and it's because it's like a meaty nut. Ironic because I don't eat meat. So we'll eat nuts. We would eat nuts all day. So we'd love for Planters to be our first sponsor, our title sponsor, and we gotta make that happen. And look, not for nothing, this is a show that is up for being nominated. That is up for consideration, shall I say?
We have been nominated to be nominated for a major television award. Somebody has told us that we should consider submitting for a nomination. So we're three steps removed.
Not just me, because we know I have said that's a good idea. We've had other people say that's a great idea. It's a great idea.
Yeah, we have been nominated to nominate ourselves for nomination. That's where we're at in terms of this program finally getting a little bit of recognition.
All right. Sorry. So I'm glad you've taken a little bit of initiative and you're not torturing the viewers with the Sportish mug. But in case you're wondering, here it is, folks.
All right, let's start our program. We're going to talk a little bit about James Harden being traded. Yeah, we're going to get to your Papa shot. Let me do what I do. Let me run. Let me run. You don't have a Clydesdale and keep him in the barn. Let me do what makes me great. We're going to talk about the Houston Rockets trading.
Think of yourself as a Clydesdale
to the Brooklyn Nets. I'm a show pony.
By the way, isn't it a thoroughbred? Don't you talk like you're like the thoroughbreds want to run.
Yeah,
the Clydesdale.
No. Thoroughbreds work. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to be brought out in front of the crowd and everybody go, "Oh, look how nice." That's the equine I want to be compared to. Anyway, we're going to talk about the James Harden trade. Novak Djokovic has made a ridiculous list of demands to get out of quarantine in Australia before the Australian Open. We're going to talk about that. We got a number of other things that we're going to get into as well. But the most important thing that we're going to talk about is Keith alluded to it earlier when he told you about how he's bleeding from so many different places. That's because he is trying to install in his home, which is, I mean, a small step down from a Dave & Buster's. Like you've got all of the games that there are to have in a rec room, and now you're trying to add one more, and it's giving you some trouble.
Well, so the Papa Shot surprisingly does not come built. So it comes in a box and a lot of parts. And so I've been building. So today, with the urging of my family, and urging is my wife actually left a giant card for me on Saturday morning. Like it looked like a giant homemade birthday card,
like a greeting card. Okay,
a huge one. And it said, Keith, I think probably my dear. And then it opened up and it just had a list of all the things I was supposed to do this weekend.
Nice. A honeydew list. So before you continue the story, I do think we got to set the baseline. Like how handy are you?
Oh no. On a one to home design show, on a one to fix it up show, or whatever it is.
A one to Bob Vila.
Yeah, on a one.
Remember Bob Vila? Remember Bob Vila?
Yes.
Yeah.
On a one to Bob Vila, I am a risk blowing up the house guy.
Okay, gotcha.
So but oddly enough, I keep trying. Like I've built a lot of things. I built an air hockey table. I've built a lot of things, but I'm terrible at it.
Listen,
I'm terrible at it.
I'm going to pay you a rare compliment. I don't know anyone who sticks to things they're bad at more than you. No one keeps trying to do things that they have demonstrated they are horrible at more than you.
Episode 200 of Sportish. So I'm not that good at it, but I'm like, look, I bought the thing, and they're not that cheap. I mean, they're not that expensive, but they're,
a couple $100,
a couple bills,
yep.
right?
Yep.
And I bought a decent one. Like I figured if I got a little bit more expensive one, often that the extra $50-$70 makes a difference, right?
True of most things. You never need the most expensive. You also never want the cheapest.
No, you got to go up, especially in kind of this Amazon world where, you're getting a lot of knockoff products on the low end, and you really, you run into risk. All right. I built a rowing machine not that long ago. It was just a box of parts. So I went and built it, and the whole thing hasn't gone well. It's too many parts. And in the course of doing this, I have cut my hand, and I somehow managed to cut my foot because I dropped a wrench on my foot. And then I finally get the thing, what I think is pretty close to, like, we're about to turn it up. I put a hole in my ceiling because the Pop-A-Shot is not it's a little bit too tall, but you can put it down a little bit. But here's the thing. When you turn it up, you actually have to be taller, because it's going on an angle. So now I put a little hole in the ceiling. It's all going great. And then I get it up there. And then one of those little cotter pin things where you push it in and it goes down. Uh-huh. Well, that broke off. So that broke off. So now I had to get on the phone with these folks and be like, hey, I sound like Bart Smalls. Hey, hey, this is Bart Smalls. My Pop-A-Shot's not.
If you don't know what Keith is talking about, scroll back 2 episodes on ftfnext.com and listen to the Ballad of Bart Smalls.
Should I make Bart Smalls my consumer complaint? So I called up and they're going to send. They're like, yeah, it's part EFG 24, and they're sending another one out. So I've got to, but then I'm going to have to take it all apart to put this piece back on. So there is nothing, and I've already had to disassemble this thing 3 times, different parts of it. There is nothing worse than building something and then getting towards the end and then looking and saying, oh, that was supposed to go on backwards.
Yep.
So that's,
this should
I'm a little frustrated.
No one. This should surprise no one. I am awful at building things.
Yeah, but you don't try. I don't think you try.
Well, unlike you, I know my limitations, and I know. So instead of you, who are now into round 3 of trying to build this Pop-A-Shot, and you've been on the phone with Pop-A-Shot support, I know that I can save myself all of this aggravation by paying someone $50.
I won't do that. I won't do that. I'm not paying someone to build.
I want to be happy, and you're only happy when you're unhappy.
Self-respect. I want to look at that Pop-A-Shot that's put a hole in my ceiling and probably taken off one of my toes and said, I built that. I built that.
Congratulations. I'm sure it'll be a great monument.
Yep. Yeah. And when the kids go off to college, it'll be done.
Just in time for you to use it. Okay. So this is, believe it or not, we are right now in the Joe Biden administration. Now, we're not when we're recording it. We're recording this show on Monday, still in the last throes of Donald Trump. We are now, however, when you're watching this, we're like 13, 12 plus hours into the Joe Biden presidency.
All better now.
Fact, how's he doing? That fact reminded me of a surreal experience that you and I shared. Back when Donald Trump was elected president in 2016, we were hosting a local radio show in the Hudson Valley. And we, like I think most people that had any sort of microphone placed in front of their faces during that week in early November 2016, we're trying to sort through our feelings about what was going on live on air. And we were trying to do it in the context of sports. I remember it was right after the Cubs won the World Series and had their World Series parade. And we were like, boy, it just seems like we are so, disjointed, and we seem so far apart. Like, are we ever going to have an experience like the Cubs World Series parade, where all these people come together and you have no idea what the person standing next to you thinks about politics. And you just know that you're a bunch of people that are together because you're happy about your baseball team winning some games. So now that we've made it through the other side, Keith, and my opinion is, more than any other president that I can remember, and I would go so far as to say in history, we have been through a presidency where the chief executive of our nation inserted himself into sport and the world of sport more than I'm going to say any president we've ever had. I'm a little flaky on like what Grover Cleveland may have done.
I can't speak for the Andrew Jackson administration, so I'm a little fuzzy.
Exactly. You know, John Quincy Adams apparently was a big cricket guy, but we've come through 4 years where it seems like the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue touched every part of society. I'm curious how you think the last 4 years have impacted the sports world.
Well, look, I think inherently, because everything that was public, particularly things that had, racial undertones or in any way could be divisive, became increasingly political, right? And particularly as people with positions of power and authority, including obviously professional athletes, were more likely to use their platform to speak towards whether it was racial justice, political issues. So I think, look, in some ways, I think people that have always wanted athletes to kind of find and use their voice to advance social causes, you could say there was something of a silver lining of this process, I suppose, because it has kind of allowed people to kind of engage and find their voice. And we'll probably see some change because of that. I don't think we're going to see administrations in the future continue that process. I don't think you're going to see, and that's Democrat or Republican. I don't think you're going to see Joe Biden saying, boy, those guys need to stand up for the anthem. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're going to critique a quarterback. I don't think they're going to critique. I mean, perhaps around team names, you might hear that here and there. But even that, I think my guess is there's going to be a fairly healthy appetite from this administration to stay fairly far from, the politics of sports, for lack of a better term. They'll probably return to a far more kind of normalized relationship that politicians have with athletes, which is to kind of, love them and revere them universally, invite them to the White House, go to the championship games, and stay as, out of the fray, I suppose, as possible.
Now, I'm not one of those people who believes that sports and politics were ever not intertwined, because they always have been.
Sure.
I'm not one of those people who thinks that athletes should not be allowed to use their platform to express themselves in however they want to. Just because you have a job doesn't mean you can't also have an opinion. However, I do think that the last 4 years have led to a significant change in people putting out their beliefs, people putting out their opinions in a way that is only going to divide us further. I'm not making any judgment on whether that's right or wrong, or whether you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying it's happened. Prior to the last 4 years, I've never seen an entire basketball team, the way the WNBA's Atlanta Dream did, campaign for one political candidate over another. You just didn't see those kind of systemic things. You didn't see entire teams rejecting an invitation to the White House that they haven't gotten yet. Like, these are just things that you just did not see before. Yeah. And, we talked about this in our show last week with the PGA pulling its tournaments away from Donald Trump properties because it's just become so toxic, this segment of our politics. And I wonder if we won't, as a collective group of people, right, ever be able to enjoy sports the same way as we have before, regardless of who the occupant of the White House is.
I think we will. And I think there's a couple. First of all, I think people are ready to take a breath right now. And I think, I think people are going to want to take a breath. And a lot of things are going to happen, certainly when the pandemic is over. And I think that, look, the pandemic has brought a lot of time for introspection and a lot of time where we are not doing what we normally do, which is, hang out with our friends, travel. And so there is an intensity of the moment that's been brought about because of that as well. But I also think in the end of the day, it's not particularly sustainable from a business perspective to have this continue, right? I mean, everyone likes to use the term, well, it's a business when it's convenient to them. It is a business. Like, they're all businesses. College sports is a business. Yeah. Certainly NFL is it's a massive business, a global business. The NBA is a business. It's a business. And at some point, those involved with that business enterprise, including the athletes who make a lot of money, including the owners, including everyone, the networks, they are going to want to return to a sustainable business model. And that will drive a lot of this. but understanding that as we move through the pandemic and as we move to a more, shall we say, traditional presidency, and I do think that there will be an interest, particularly as, we're in a fragile economy anyway. I think there will be a lot of interest in kind of finding a way to ensure the sustainable business practices of all of these operations. Because the one thing that I think we can all agree upon, most Americans, we all like to we all like to make money. Like that seems to be one of the things. Very few things Americans can agree upon. I think we all like making money. So I think that might be that, and that might help. That might be part of the narrative around college sports as well. Is there's going to have to be a way to build a sustainable business practice to ensure its solvency in the future.
What crystallized this for me is somebody put on Twitter an ESPN advertising slogan from 2007. ESPN was using as an advertising slogan roughly 13 years ago, if not for sports, you'd have to talk about politics. And there was a picture of the U.S. Capitol behind it. How times have changed. It feels, and maybe it's because we do a show like this and we are kind of around people that are like us and we have these kind of conversations, but it feels like sports time as escapism from the real world is over. And whether that's good or bad is totally up to you, but it doesn't feel like now you can come home from a long day of work, losing your tie, turn on the ball game and essentially get to shut your mind off from whatever might be going on in the world or in society writ large.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think we will return to something a little bit more akin to that at some point, because otherwise, again, it won't be sustainable. Like the NBA, the NFL will not be sustainable if people are like, oh, I just can't take it. I can't watch it, right? It doesn't work. And so, there's a difference between, as we said, kind of the understanding that sports and politics are, they're interwoven. I mean, sports is part of the social fabric of who we are. And a lot of, kind of the sociology of certainly of America, but of the world are navigated through the lens of sport. That doesn't mean that we don't want to watch a ball game and not have to be inherently political. I mean, we like watching sports sometimes because we really enjoy, we understand that there are all of these dynamics at play to make and produce this game, but we also kind of revel in the joy of sport, both as a participant and as a spectator. And I think that will return. That doesn't mean that theorists and so forth won't spend a lot of time kind of dissecting it. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to use sport as a vehicle for progress, but it does mean at some point we are going to want to sit down and be like, well, it's the NFC playoffs. I'm good with that. Like, right. And I think that will be, there will always be people that don't want that. But I do think, I mean, look, we all need it. I mean, that's part of what we do.
I mean, I do find, and I'm glad you brought up, it's the NFC playoffs, right? Because I was watching Saints Bucks last weekend, and you watch.
How about the Bucks? How about the Bucks?
How about the Bucks? Keith Strudler, proud Tampa Bay Bucks fan from back in the day.
I watched them lose games in the old sombrero.
But has there ever been a team, and this is we'll get into this in a second. I want to make the real point first. I was watching that game, right? And so you're watching an NFL football game, and they've got social justice messages painted onto the field. They've got names of victims of police brutality in the back of their helmet. And you're thinking, oh, all right, clearly it's this, left-leaning, more progressive attitude that the NFL has taken. And then you're watching it while holding your phone in your other hand, and you're scrolling through Twitter. And I am being reminded in equal measure that Drew Brees has said that he doesn't support anyone who kneels for the national anthem, that Tom Brady had a MAGA hat in his locker and supports Donald Trump. And you're just, no matter what side you're on, they have found a way to make it so that you cannot be happy watching this game.
So I sometimes, and I will say, we talked about this right before the show. I think sometimes you have to shut it off. And I will say, I'm getting a lot better at certainly measuring what I consume. I love, I'm a big news guy. Certainly I love talking with journalists. We've had a lot at our school. I mean, just in the past few years, we've had some really interesting people. We had Peter Baker and Susan Glasser this year. Name drop.
I was going to say, do you need to take a second, drop out of frame, pick those names up?
They're unbelievable. They're the best. They're so good. But but I also understand, you know what, I need to consume this now in smaller doses. And I got to say, look, while we are kind of launching our social media hub at Montclair, and I understand the power of social, I've kind of turned off Twitter. Like I can't, I find it not to be helpful. And I find that, the camps are set, the echo chambers exist. At some point, you have to, and again, I think the pandemic has made this more pronounced, but at some point you have to realize like the actual real people in your lives are probably where you need to spend. Like I need to spend more time trying to kill myself with a Papa shot while my kids make fun of me. Like that's probably where I should be putting more of my time and effort. And, there are ways in which certainly, we talked about this before the show, but certainly at Montclair, where we are trying to kind of really address issues of systemic racism and issues that, by the way, at all colleges, we have people on both sides of the aisle. We have students who are lean to the left. I have students lean to the right. We have, and having that kind of conversation and navigating that as a community, that's something that I really take a lot of joy in. Having arguments on Twitter, I'm kind of over it right now.
I've long believed that the more cliche something is, the more true it is. And sometimes a little ignorance really is bliss. Like sometimes not knowing where, like sometimes not knowing where the quarterback stands in the political spectrum is a nice change.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still a Bucs fan.
Now, and the question I was going to ask in the middle there, and I'm glad that we could finish that discussion before asking it. Has there been a team in the history of their franchise that has consistently nailed their uniforms more than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Boy, well, do you like the old Buccaneer Bruce?
Love them.
Let me tell you what.
Love them. I think part of me, like, throwback day for the Tampa Bay Bucs is a great day.
So I will tell you, I was at the Bucs' first home win. I was a kid, right?
Okay.
Right. So they won 2 games. They beat the Saints and the Cardinals, right? A road game and a home game at the end of their second season, right? They went 0-14, then they went 2-12. We actually had to leave that game a little early because I spilled an ice cream cone on the guy in front of me and he hadn't noticed. And my dad was like, let's get up. He was a big guy. So we didn't quite stay to the very end. But I will tell you, my first sports crush, we moved to Houston right after I finished 3rd grade. But my first sports crush was Doug Williams. Doug Williams, top draft pick of the Tampa Bay Bucks. He was, of course, then he went on to win a Super Bowl with Washington, a game I was actually at, which broke my heart.
Famously asked how long he was a black quarterback.
Forever. I guess as soon as he started becoming a quarterback.
As soon as he became a quarterback, yes.
But I love Doug Williams. I love John McKay. I love that whole Ricky Bell, that whole the Selman brothers. So he was really my first sports crush. I actually went in 4th grade. I moved to Texas and I went for Halloween. I went as Doug Williams. I had the helmet, the whole thing. I had the whole outfit. But I didn't, I loved it because it was the Bucs. I didn't find it to be all that attractive. You like it,
really?
Though.
I did.
It's the creamsicle thing.
I liked it, and I think where they're at now with the pewter is. I think
special. It's special.
I think I don't think they've missed. Like, so many teams' uniforms are either boring or too far, and the Bucs to me have always found a way to always be on the cutting edge, always have some style, but never cross over into cartoonish. I think the Rams have this year. Like I think the new Rams uniform, they just don't work. They just don't work. No. Keep it simple.
They went into the pewter with the Warren Sapp era, and that went. And then you're right. They do have an interesting throwback. I found it weird because that was their throwback. Because I was like, well, that was the uniform I grew up with. It's not like they were like the old Packers. Although the Packers uniforms really haven't changed, I guess. They don't really have throwbacks, do they? They're like the same uniform.
I think they're wearing their throwbacks. Their throwbacks are their basic uniform. So we're talking about Keith Strudler's favorite childhood football team. I want to talk about another of Keith Strudler's favorite things, and that is rich people making ridiculous demands. So the Australian Open is trying to get underway, the tennis tournament. And Australia, if you haven't been following how the world is doing with the coronavirus, has basically crushed the virus. It does not exist in Australia. And the reason
they don't let anyone in. They don't let anyone in, though.
So the reason it doesn't exist in Australia is because they have quite literally locked down. Now, you can't have an international tennis tournament without allowing international people into your nation. So Australia is taking this very seriously. And if you want to participate in the Australian Open, as a great many of very good tennis players do,
sure,
they're making you quarantine inside a hotel. This is happening right now in Australia.
We're talking four-star, high.
I'm sure it's a very nice hotel. I'm sure
the best Melbourne has to offer, right?
I would think so. I think, I'm sure they're in the Sydney Marriott, wherever they.
No, it's not Sydney. It's in Melbourne. That shows how little you know about that.
They could be in Canberra.
No, they can't. Do you know how big Australia is?
Yes, it's huge. It's huge.
But are you talking about the quarantine? Not when they're there, when they're playing. They have to quarantine, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they have to quarantine. They have to do a 14-day quarantine.
But it didn't go well at the U.S. Open. They were furious. The U.S. Open.
There are no rules in America.
Also Queens.
In America, there are no rules. There are only suggestions. Now,
I'm just saying they felt like they were locked into the hotel. They were in like a residence inn in Queens. It wasn't so great.
So that's kind of how they feel again. And if you think they felt locked in New York, where they could have just left, in Australia, they are truly locked in. And I don't know if there's an athlete globally who has cared less about the pandemic than Novak Djokovic. At the height of coronavirus, he was having like exhibition tournaments packed with people, and then they were all going out to the clubs afterwards and posting themselves on social media, just living it up, droplets everywhere. Novak Djokovic,
but as you know, my famous droplets.
Very, yes, and Keith would accept the disease if it came from a famous person, but not if it came from Mindy down the street, who was a little reckless at the Whole Foods. Now, Novak Djokovic is sort of taking up the mantle for all of the tennis players that are in quarantine. He submitted essentially a list of demands to the Australian government saying, hey, can we do something about this quarantine that we're in? There were, I believe, 6 or 7 of them. Some of them are fine. Can we get better food? Sure. We need more access to exercise and socialization. I'm for that. Being trapped in a hotel room by yourself for 14 days.
You got to let these men and women play. They have to play.
Yeah.
They have to practice.
Yeah. But as this list went on, Keith, it got a little, shall we say, ambitious. Okay. Novak Djokovic has asked the government of Australia, this is true, that if players are forced to quarantine, if they do not allow them to test out of quarantine, which they do not appear that they want to, they should be allowed to quarantine in government-provided private homes with tennis courts so that they can train.
Now, the challenge is you've narrowed down, and it's a smart move Novak made, right? I think he realized once he's designated that the home has to have a tennis court, it's already going to be an upscale situation, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of 3 bedrooms there with a clay court in the back. Although Australia's hard court. Australia's hard court.
Australia's hard court.
Yeah.
No. If he said this at Wimbledon, that would be extreme. They've got to have a grass court in the backyard.
Well, I was saying like clay court because that's the rarest of the tennis courts.
Sure.
But then I thought, it's not. I don't want people to think that I don't know that the Australian Open's not played on clay and that the French is played on clay. So I wanted to drop that in so people think that I know just a tiny bit.
Who's your favorite cyclist?
Tadej Pogacar, this year's winner of the Tour de France.
So the one thing you'll say about Novak, now Novak has led the players' kind of unionization movement.
Yeah.
So in some ways that this is fairly in character because he has, largely said, we are going to talk about agency. He said, we're going to start pushing this forward. So a little of this you could say is in character where he wants to say, we have talent. We're going to drive this forward. There's a problem here. Part of the problem is these major tennis tournaments, the disparity between kind of the top and the bottom is real. Is really
very, very significant.
This is not even like NBA disparity where your guy on the bench is nowhere near your LeBron James or your James Harden. This is a whole other, like the guy who played his way in a qualifier is got to get back in time because he's working a shift at Denny's, the back end of this thing.
Probably not a super exaggeration. Like that guy probably teaches tennis lessons on the side.
Oh no, not probably. That's if he's lucky, right? His partner, his wife or husband, whoever, man or woman, they're probably saying, when will you finally give up this foolish fantasy? And get a real job, right? So there is that. So I'm guessing, look, the 64 seed is probably like, oh yes, I'll take that house. But he or she would also just take any house. Like I've always wanted.
So what's funny is, to his point, Novak put in his note, as many are available. So he's basically saying, like, look, I know you can't do it for all of us, but you can at least do it for the people like me. Get me and get Rafa and get Roger out of this hellhole. We are like these other people. We're rich.
By the way, the whole like them coming over and being stuck in a hotel for like 2 weeks and then having to go out and play a tournament after just basically sitting in a room eating like butter for 2 weeks. It reminds me like so Cornell track used to have this, and they still do. Like Cornell track would have these like exhibition meets with like Oxford and Cambridge, and then they would send their teams over. And there was this, and so obviously, you know, certainly in my era and even before that, obviously, and now, obviously now, you fly over, they fly over, but the early ones from like, you know, the 20s, 30s, they'd go over by ship, and they keep these logs, and the log would always be like, our first run, you know, our first practice session after landing. After landing in England did not go well. 2 weeks on a ship without exercise has made the legs grow weary. So there's like the Cornell track guys were like sitting on like some freightliner for like 2 weeks going over to England, just sitting there, you know, probably halfway to gout by the time they got there. They were like, we had a very hard time with the discus. It was heavier than we remembered.
Really, really tough to practice the javelin on a wooden ship. If that thing lands wrong, the entire operation just.
I unfortunately killed a humpback whale. It was tragic. But provided warmth and food for the remainder of the voyage. We're not sure if the British tracks are technically longer than 440 yards, but they felt quite a distance on our weary sea legs.
How quickly would you have given up athletics? Because you reached a reasonably high level in
Sure.
track and field in your sport.
Yeah.
How quickly would you have given up if you had to travel to every away meet by boat?
So we're going to take the river down to Philly? Like, is there not a road system yet? Oh, these horses we've seen, they seem robust. Oh no, I hate boats. You know, I hate boats. You know my feeling about cruises.
We talked about this on the program.
Yeah.
We share similar feelings about cruises.
Yeah.
We don't like them.
I had a boat growing up. We always had a boat growing up.
Of course you had a boat growing up.
No, it's not like
I'm sure it was nothing exorbitant, just 110, 140 feet.
no.
Summers in the Caribbean, the Mediterranean in the winter.
It was called the happenstance. No. We had a boat.
Okay, just four crew and a captain.
We had a boat because my dad grew up poor, and he lived in, I mean, not a long story. This is my second dad, but he grew up poor. He had polio as a kid. Like, he didn't have anything. So he's like, when he made it, he's like, I'm buying a boat. Now, we did not, it was like, I think the biggest boat we had was like a 24, 25 foot boat, right? It was, you trail it and we left it in this high and dry marina. We actually named our boat, I mean, get this, the Shalom. The Shalom.
Somebody, I actually heard a great boat name the other day. Somebody said that they named their boat On Assignment. So there's someone said, hey, does anybody know where Keith is? You could reply, oh, he's on assignment.
We don't have that much time left in the show. I have a great boat story. I mean, I have a great.
And we don't have that much time for your great boat story.
No, it involves what looked like a battery theft and us paying $500 to get towed from a McDonald's down the intercoastal waterway. At which point, when we came back, my dad said, "Sell this, get rid of it."
It's better that we leave it there, because I do want to talk about the Rockets trading James Harden. Now, I don't want to talk about the Rockets trading James Harden. So, Keith, I know you're a Rockets fan. Do you want to do a sports show for a second? Do you have anything you want to talk about with the actual physical trade? Because I don't particularly want to talk about that.
I mean, look, my kid, this is honestly, so Sloan, my 13-year-old, is an obsessive Rockets fan. Like, we have the fathead Rockets things all over the wall. And it's interesting watching, because he's a little torn. James Harden, like, that's his sports crush, right? That's his guy. And so, Harden's been his guy all along. And it's interesting because he's still a Rockets fan. Like, and this is where you watch like the young fans, like, do they follow the players? Do they stay with their team? He is still a Rockets fan, which is good, because I just spent like $150 on a throwback Tracy McGrady jersey. So, which is, by the way, why we went throwback. I was like, don't you buy a current player.
Smart. Always go throwback. Yep. Always. Yep. Legacy secured.
Yeah. So
unless you're OJ Simpson. Sorry, was that unnecessary? I guess that legacy was not secured. Did have a slight change after he retired.
I gotta breathe. So he's sticking with Harden, but he does want Harden to win a title. So it's interesting. So he still likes Harden. It's not like we in our generation when a player left, you're like, I hope he loses every game. Like that was just the way it was, right? As a Philly fans, I mean, you just nothing but pox on their house, obviously, when they leave.
I think that's a thing with modern sports fans, with the kids these days, is they root more for individual players as they do for teams. Here's what I want to talk about with James Harden. He is not the first player in NBA history to force a trade by being disgruntled, but he may have elevated the art to new heights by essentially saying, I am unhappy in Houston. We are in a pandemic. I don't care. I'm going to go to the Gentleman's Cabaret. I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to put on as much weight as I can. I'm not going to perform. And I'm going to make sure that every time a microphone is turned on in my presence, I am talking about how unhappy I am. Kind of the big four of you got to get me the heck out of here.
Have you ever seen a player use weight as a weapon more than James Harden?
Unbelievable. I mean, and I give him credit. That weight came right off as soon as he got to Brooklyn. He crossed the Mississippi and dropped 40 pounds. Now, here's what I respect about what James Harden did. And it's made me think about, boy, I wish this is how the rest of the world worked. I think, Keith, play along with my hypothetical. I think that you shouldn't be allowed to be fired from any job in America. I think once you get hired, it's up to your boss to get rid of you if they want to get rid of you. So I think that regular people should be allowed to do what James Harden did. And they should say, you know what, boss? If you want to get rid of me that bad, trade me. You got to find somewhere else to send me. Now, that said, maybe they're going to trade you somewhere you don't want to go. There's nothing that says, unless you're a very good employee, as James Harden was a very good basketball player, maybe you don't get to write your own ticket. Maybe you don't have a no trade clause. Maybe they can send you somewhere you don't want to be. I think that it would drastically alter the workplace in America. And I think it would do it in such a way that was much more beneficial to people like us who could talk and laugh about it.
I could just see the conversation I'd have with my boss. Excuse me, is Iowa Southern Southwest? Is that a real college? Like, do I have to go there? Like, do they have homes? Do they sell homes there? Like, I looked on Zillow and no one has a kitchen. There's no kitchens.
I kind of think for that very reason, American worker productivity would increase. I think by and large, most people would be much more inclined to do a better job and to work harder if they knew their boss could trade them. However, there will be some, whether they're great employees who are disgruntled or whether they're just bad apples, there will be some that will be like, hey, Joe, I need you to file that TPS report. And Joe will tell them where they can stick it.
Joe will just hold up a giant hot dog and be like, I'm going to eat my way out of that expense report. Put this hot dog on your expense report. Now, look, I mean, players do have good players. I mean, this is, again, the divide. Really good players in the NBA and a handful in the NFL, but really in the NBA, and in some cases, I guess, baseball, they have incredible power.
Yes.
Right? The only thing I will say, let's see how this plays out, and then, so, I mean, is the Nets job just to figure out how to make bad decisions? Like, is that just how this works? They're like, look, we tried this once before. It didn't work. What are the odds of that happening again?
That's a great point, especially because this time they're like, we've tried this once before, but just not with good enough players. Like they were really good, but they weren't this good. And yeah, when Kyrie comes back from his exile that he has to serve for going to like his sister's birthday party or whatever he did, when he comes back from that, what are they going to do?
Well, I will also say a friend of mine texted me and he goes, yep, because knowing I'm a Rockets fan like Keith, I'm looking forward to watching the Rockets win titles when I'm in a retirement home. Like they have 700 picks. So, and I will also say for Rockets fans, and this is kind of the interesting part about the NBA. Look, you do anything you can to try to get a title. And I think we kind of agree on that. Like you do take your shots when you're close. And the Nets were not going to win unless they had, I mean, it was clear it wasn't going to work unless they had another piece of this puzzle, right? Yes. Probably not even getting out of the East, but certainly the Lakers were too good, right? There's too much coming out of the West. So you take your shot. I happen to think they made a really bad trade, but they gave the Rockets the one thing, because the Rockets weren't going to win. We've already figured out we weren't going to win. They gave us the one thing we all love, which is hope for the future. Like that's kind of the most fun part. Like my son's thrilled. He's so excited. He's like, every year we're drafting first round draft picks. Like that's a great thing to have. So in kind of in a sports landscape where, you know, everyone wants to win the whole thing, and if you don't win, you're disappointed. The next best thing is like, let's look to the draft. Like that's the second. I'd rather have lots of draft picks than finish third in the NBA.
First round draft picks in the NBA are like the backup quarterback for the struggling NFL team. Like there is no one who is going to save your bacon more than that guy. And then you realize, just as you realize the backup quarterback was the backup for a reason, most first round picks do not save franchises.
Well, you know why? Because almost everyone that plays in the NBA right now was a first round pick. Very few guys make it in from the second round. So at some point you're like, oh, these guys, they're all well, that was a first round pick at one point. Like every single guy in the league was probably a first round pick.
But yes, but you don't just need a first round pick to win in the NBA. You need a generational talent. You need a Joel Embiid, you need a LeBron James, you need a James Harden, you need a Kevin Durant. And there are plenty of good players that populate NBA rosters that aren't of the caliber that you need to be able to win a championship. So unless you catch lightning in a bottle or you get some number one picks in the right years, more than likely you're just going to be right back on the train to mediocrity town.
They are. So we're going to get some excitement. Look, the Celtics are the case point. Like the Celtics were the team that had 700 draft picks, still haven't won a title yet, right? And as smart as all of those moves were, still haven't won a title yet. And so
Philadelphia as well. Philadelphia, I mean, did this strategy to the extreme. And while they're awfully close, they may only be a Bradley Beal away from coming out of the East. They're certainly not there yet. This was a wild episode of Sportish, huh?
It was a roller coaster ride. But I will tell you, I hope the viewers enjoy this 48 minutes of not having to be miserable and just thinking about all the awful things that are happening right now, not having to worry, not hitting refresh to try to get the vaccine, just kicking back and enjoying. And if you want to keep, just go to ftfnext.com and start from the beginning and watch them all.
Or counterpoint, if you came to this program because it makes you miserable and it's like listening to a sad song, you wanted to feel that way, I hope we could have provided that for you.
Yeah. And by the way, any tips on a Pop-A-Shot, send them my way. Not that I'm checking Twitter, but you can tweet at us anyway. I'll be there.
All right. We hope that's all for this episode of Sportish. We hope that you will join us next week, same time, same channel. Or if you want to hear this episode or all our others again, they're available audio form podcasts by going to Apple, Google, Spotify, all those places. So for Mike and Keith, I'm Jeff. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Sportish. See you next time.